Over the past few months, we spoke with founders building companies across Asia and beyond. Not to capture moments of success, but to understand what it takes to keep building when things get hard. Many of the lessons our guests shared about resets, difficult choices, and the long game were ones we were learning alongside them. These conversations aren't about trends and shortcuts. They're about judgment, resilience, and continuing anyway. Here are some of the moments that stayed with us. Maybe we go back a little bit. How did you join Squirrel and partnered with Derek Lee?
And when he told me what he was going to do, that was AI, adaptive learning. I said, what? What is AI? No one knew what AI was.
And that was back in 2005, before the AI hype.
Exactly. But the theory he told me, I totally agree. He said traditional education is almost gone. And even VIP one-to-one, one tutor to one student is not scalable, right? You cannot make the market really big. You can only very precise market. But the demands from the market are huge in China, in Southeast Asia, and everywhere in the world. So we need to use the technology to develop a personalized learning, which means each student at different level, doesn't matter they are good student or poor student and which country, they should learn very precisely, and they need to learn the most suitable content for the moment that they need to learn. So I totally agree with his concept and this kind of theory. So, but at that time, he didn't have enough money to do a lot of things.
To hire you.
Yeah. And he put all the money he raised into R&D to hire important people to build the engine, to design the content, right? So he didn't have money to do the marketing, branding.
So the idea that eye could be the window to the human health and we could predict other organ diseases from the eye is quite novel, right? It's very tough to persuade doctors, especially doctors very conservative.
Rightly so, right? Because they are in charge of people's health.
Right. So safety is the most important mission to them. So they should be conservative. So we prepared a lot, like eye could be the biomarker for the future disease. We should validate that with many prestigious journals. Finally, we were able to persuade many doctors.
And where were you at that time, and why did you decide to start this company?
So I think we started in February 2015 when my co-founder Reynald Vijaya and me were doing our masters at Harvard Business School. At that time, it was really a confluence of different factors that led us to start a company. So it wasn't an epiphany whereby, hey, I want to start a company. It was really a series of events whereby we were very inspired by Peter Thiel's talk at Harvard Business School at that point in time, whereby he talked about something that was quite annoying but factually accurate, which was Asia, especially Southeast Asia, don't need innovation. It just needs execution, because Asia was so far behind in terms of innovation. And that was true because at that point in time, the companies that are started in this part of the world were, hey, we are the Uber of Asia, we are the XYZ of Asia, right? Really copying the model that we have seen in the US, right? And given that we were very fortunate to be to rise up from middle class to be in a position of privilege, having very good education and professional background experience, we thought that, hey, it really makes sense for us to pay it back forward. Hence, we decided to start funding societies while we were in school.
So he said Asia or South Asia?
I think he said Asia, but the reality is that I think when he was referring at that point in time to China and India, but the reality is that I think Southeast Asia is even behind.
Basically, Asians are copycats, right? Basically.
Yeah.
So that kind of made you angry and want to do something about it, or?
I think angry is a pretty strong word, but I think it was slightly annoying as an Asian myself. But the reality is that it was true, and that there were so many things that we could do, and so going by that train of thought, we decided to study the top 50 innovative companies in US in the last 5 years, right? Because we realized that, hey, given that Southeast Asia is probably 5-10 years behind US, if whatever that's happening in US at that point in time would probably be just I will be ahead of curve in Southeast Asia. So actually, we assess the companies against three key criteria. The first was passion. We want to do something that's meaningful. Number two was impact. Given that our opportunity cost is quite high, myself coming from McKinsey, Accenture, McKinsey, and KKR, and my co-founder coming from a family business background, our opportunity cost is quite high. So we wanted to build something that's very meaningful for Southeast Asia. And finally, was really path to be number one, even though at that point in time, we probably only have a set of PowerPoint decks and initial thoughts, right? So it was really by assessing the opportunities of the 50 most innovative companies in the last few years in US, we decided that, hey, peer-to-peer lending was probably the one that fits all three criteria. And then we further adapted the model to Southeast Asia context to really focus on peer-to-business lending, and that's where we started.
Do you still remember who were your first clients, and how did you feel when you landed them?
So many of them came through PR news. So we find that that's one of the most efficient way to get your word out, right? Because people don't trust in ads, they trust in news. Sometimes even fake news, which is not what we encourage. But that's how we started initially, and through candidly brokers, because we didn't have any much network or so. In fact, I still fondly remember a Lego distributor in Singapore, and was starting out a shop. Later on, started out in Malaysia and Jakarta and Indonesia, whereby he needed financing to stock up. He's a fairly old uncle. So there is some level of key man risk involved in the business, but we were able to structure a product that helps him to stock up quite quickly and even launch the Malaysia business. So when he launched the Malaysia business, the Malaysia subsidiary was quite new, but we basically used our Singapore team to credit assess the holding company in Singapore to make sure that if the Malaysia subsidiary does not repay, our Singapore business, we can actually get money back from the Singapore holding company. So the Malaysia team lent to them, and the Singapore team supported.
Why in the car business? It's not necessarily deep tech or sexy.
Yeah, you're right. It's not necessarily deep tech or not sexy. My dad, in fact, asked me this question: why do you want to sell cars? In fact, my dad once told me there's a few groups of people that you do not trust, right? The top three categories, um, and of course
Insurance guy.
the lawyers and the politicians are up there. But
Okay.
the number three or number two guy, which is not far away, would be the car salesman, the used car salesman specifically, not even the
Yeah.
new car salesman. And not exactly the industry that inspires the most trust. But for me, it was very straightforward. The way I look at life was that how do I look at adjacencies in the business that could have a long tail in that sense? And at being a VC for like 5 or 6 years of my life, it was very clear I need to look for a few important outcomes, or rather few characteristics when it comes to running a business, especially a venture-backed one. Not all businesses are the same, but in venture-backed businesses, I do think that number one, scale. Size is super important, right? Scalability, which is the ability for you to scale, replicate the business, or replicability is also super important. And what I would call long tail, right, or LTV, or for that matter, ecosystem, right, in that sense, would be super important. Now, if you look at this, automotive itself, $1 trillion vertical, no questions, check that box, right? So it's big business. Replicable, we look at competition across the board in Southeast Asia at that point in time, 8 years, 9 years ago. There wasn't really any tech-enabled online dealership platforms in that sense. What we had at that point in time were mostly classifieds. So it is what it is. We didn't think classified as a competitor. They
Oh,
do
there was
think some of them may,
Craigslist, right? Back
yeah.
then, there was
Craigslist, yeah,
Craigslist.
but Craigslist is what we call a classified, right? So we don't exactly compete with classifieds that way. We use them, we work with them. In fact, we advertise, we spend a lot of money on them. So number two, less competition, very scalable business across the board, right? Which is very important coming again from a Singaporean standpoint, because if I'm based in the United States, I don't care about these things because the market is huge, right? But if I'm based in Singapore, tiny Singapore, I better be worried. And from day zero, I should have a global perspective of the business. So number two, scalability, global perspective of the business, replicability, very important. So I think that sort of checks the box as well. Number three really is that what we call again neighborhoods or LTV, right? So apart from selling cars, where can you go? Can you go into financial services? Can you go into lending? Can you get into insurance? Blah blah blah, right? So I think all said and done, that is actually very very critical and important as well. And I think that again checks the box, because when you think about life, with selling a car once to the customers is not super interesting on a single transaction basis. But what's very interesting is, can you lend the money to the customer? Can you finance the customer? Can you do insurance, right? And we think that the automotive space lends itself very well like this, because that was actually the reason why we didn't do properties, because in the onset I wanted to do something in properties, right? But properties itself, it didn't lend itself very well on the third side of things, because it's almost, I would say, impossible, but it's very hard to get into all property loans, right? Property insurance also don't pay very well, right? And then the agency of the adjacencies of the business. I mean, I can't be hiring electricians to deal with this, right? And number two thing about properties is that you have problems in places like Singapore, whereby restricted purchases. So as a company, as a platform, how much can you really make, right? In that sense, so it's tougher, and that's the reason why we didn't go for property space. And to sum it up, I do think that the fundamental and most important thing, and whenever I tell and speak with entrepreneurs, is what exactly is the problem you're trying to solve, right? What exactly are you trying to bring to this world in that sense, and what value add do you provide? I think that fundamentally underscores all businesses.
People always say, what is the problem you want to solve, right, with a startup? So what is the problem that AI Path One wants to solve?
A lot of people have very good ideas. A lot of good ideas don't make money, right? And there are two very painful statistics. One statistic is that 9 out of 10 startups fail, right? And that is well over $1 trillion of VC funding into just the startups that fail. That's a lot of money, right? It's a lot of economic waste. Another statistic is that 72% of new products fail. And that means they're not startups, but they are from companies that we know, right? Like the traditional enterprises.
Yep.
And this leads, if you do a post-mortem on that, why, right, do these good ideas with great founders and great backing fail? It's because we always have continuously updated gaps in our understanding of our customers. Customers are always changing, their expectations are always changing because the alternatives to your business are always improving, right? So we have an imperfect understanding of our customers because it's very expensive and slow to do research on customers. And a lot of smaller companies think that, customer research is too expensive and we don't need it. And yet customer research is an $18 billion industry. And the biggest spenders on customer research are the biggest companies in the world. So it is very important. Yeah. But it's very ironic that the smaller companies can't do it or can't afford to do it. So customer research is so expensive, and competitor research is also something that's incredibly overlooked. So if you design your business, you're actually also targeting a competitor's weak point because you want to capture a very specific competitor's customers, or you want to target very specifically customers who are not being served well by company X. So those are two very expensive types of research. And then to take that research and turn that into something that's actionable, right? To take that research and turn it into something actionable, that's a skill set. A/B testing, multivariate testing, statistics, scenario analysis, risk assessment. Those are very specific skills, and not every company will have the full complement of skills at the right time of product development. So there are a lot of gaps to a company being successful. And so having been very much on the product side, and then for 2 years being very much into the go-to-market side, I realized that there was no framework in the whole world, and I'm a frameworks, management science, and marketing science nerd now. There was no framework that connected research into what we should actually build. And then from that long list of those good ideas of things to do, there was no way to connect that to what do we think the return on investment will be, which is mind-blowing because the research guys are begging somebody in the company in engineering to please build this based on the research I've done, right? And the engineering guys have a roadmap that even without this new idea is not going to be completed in the next 1, 2, or 3 years. So there's just this overwhelming roadmap. And because the company is not growing, by definition, your roadmap is now busy work. AirPath is designed to address, to pre-validate, to explore all the ideas that you have, all the scenarios, work out the scenarios all the way as if you were already going to execute them, but not making a single bet. Examining up to 4.5 million scenarios and pre-testing them before you actually do them, so you can actually learn exponentially faster.
After your 0 to 1, you also scaled so fast. It's unbelievable. How do you manage to, spread and acquire customers in such rapid speed?
3 things are are really important in answering that question, Miro. The very first thing is that it's always important to stay true to your mission. Understand what you're trying to accomplish from day one. And I've said this already, that we're trying to be a important part of helping to close a global protection gap. It's a multi-trillion-dollar disparity between the haves and the have-nots of protection. So this is by definition a global matter, a global protection gap. So our destination was never going to be one country. It was even not going to be one region, because this problem is pervasive around the globe. The second thing is that I came out of an incumbent insurance company that has an amazing superpower, but their amazing superpower is their global franchise. And so if I learned anything from my years of being in the problem, from my years of studying insurance and understanding the thing I'm trying to bring solutions to, I understood that this global infrastructure, this global network, is really a critical success story in insurance. If you're going to dominate one market with one product, you'll eventually saturate the market, and that product will run its course. But instead, we're trying to help to close a global protection gap where we can bring learnings from Asia to Europe and North America, just like we can bring learnings from Europe and North America to Asia. And so we find that we have this built-in sharing mechanism where learnings in one part of the world can make it to the other parts of the world. We knew that we were trying to solve a big problem, not a little problem. That gives us a huge opportunity to bring value, not just in one geography, but in all the geographies we wanted to serve. The second thing is that we work with really big clients. So an example of a big global client we work with is Samsung, the manufacturer of the cell phone. And we worked initially with Samsung in 2 countries in Asia. And by the end of next year, we expect that that relationship will extend not just in Asia, but it should be in 45 countries across Asia,
Wow.
Europe, and Africa. So it's very specifically tied to a product that we like, very specifically tied to following our partners. We have a partner-led strategy that says we're trying to solve the protection gap for our partners' customers. We play in a B2B to C marketplace. So we are really focused on those big partners, and we'll follow them to the geographies that they want to see, that we can bring our capabilities to help them succeed everywhere around the world.
So US has always been our second market apart from China. And the second reason is US has pretty good education background, even though we know some negative stories, but overall speaking, everyone wants to go to US for education, right? For college, for high school, and they are good. They have English base, and they have different creativity and knowledge, and everything was pretty pioneer, I think, in the whole world. So of course, we need to be at the very top level of everything. So China, of course, is one of the toppest, and US will be another one. So we need to have the both countries market and branding contents ready. Then we will be on the toppest, probably the number 1 in the whole world. Then at the time when we go to other countries, it will be much, much easier for us, because we will be on a higher level, higher point to go to other cities, other countries. That will be much easier for us. So, and then we will be able to have the English version with English contents and Chinese version with Chinese contents. Then there will be many demands from Southeast Asian countries. They will need these 2 parts. So, and then we will have them ready. And of course, we can do content localization if the country wants to have their local contents. So there will be 2 major contents from 2 major countries, plus their local countries' localized contents. So that's the strategy. And in US, we've been working on the content localization for more than a year. So by early next year, we should be able to have our elementary math ready, and then we can start to do the market expansion sales. Yeah.
Now, you speak at a lot of international platforms, and you meet ministers of education from a lot of countries. What kind of feedback do you hear from them? Do you think they are embracive of using AI in their local markets?
Oh, yes, absolutely. From Asia, from Africa, from Europe. I think all the ministries in different countries, they are desperately want to adopt AI technology to their classrooms, to their students, the teachers, and supplementary tutoring as well. Because AI is the big trend already. They don't want to be left behind. And secondly, everywhere they have one big problem is it's so hard to train and educate really, really good teachers. That takes longer time than they expected. And it's so hard to control and manage teachers. But of course, teachers, they are really, really hardworking. We still want the teachers to bring better quality of teaching or content to the students, right? So they have to educate the teachers. But how to educate the teachers? If the teachers know how to use AI learning or AI teaching system or some platform, that will save time. It will help the teachers. So all the ministers I've met, they really want to learn from China, to be honest, because China is really going beyond many other countries in AI education.
One of the very pragmatic issues is running a global company from San Francisco is probably the worst place on earth. You know, the time zone is really difficult. You're always late. Even within the US, one thing I learned is that 2/3 of the US population sits on the eastern time zone. So, you know, and so when you're waking up in the morning, you know, if you start your day at 9, people are already going to lunch in New York, and obviously the Europe is going to bed. So very tough time zone. It was really tough.
But then why so many global tech companies are based there?
Because it's a bubble. And that's why maybe they are successful. It's because, you know, when you're in California or in Silicon Valley, it's all about in your own little bubble. And I think it's great for innovation. They attract a lot of great people, and so it's great to start from this. And you know, all those great American companies, ask anyone who tried to have a call from Singapore. You know, they give you a time between 9 and 3 p.m. maximum Pacific time. Huh? So when you want to work with, I don't know, Google or Meta or whatever, you have to adapt to their time zone. So
they do feel like they're in the center of the universe, right?
Absolutely.
So tell us how you have clients who are like global luxury retailers, Grab, etc. Give us a sense like how you help them to serve their customers globally.
Yeah. For us, the ideal client is global e-commerce merchants who are selling internationally. Again, because stablecoin is really useful for cross-border payments, and a bit less. You know, we're not so interested in having a pure Singapore merchants only selling into Singapore. It's probably not the biggest use case. One of our merchants, for instance, is Trip.com, which is probably the largest online travel agent in the world.
Chinese company.
Correct. Yes. For us, it's really a perfect merchant because travel, by definition, they are selling across the world. It's fairly high ticket item. Because of the fraud issues and so on, they are considered by the card network, MasterCard and Visa, as higher risk. What this brings is that with our stablecoin payment solution, they're able to sell to those 500 million people around the world who have a stablecoin without ever touching anything stablecoin or anything crypto. We're licensed by MAS as a major payment institution, and we're licensed we have the merchant acquiring activity to do merchant payment. We also have money transfer and the last activity, which is called digital payment token, which is the name in Singapore for anything crypto related. And so we're making sure all the transactions are processed safely to avoid any kind of money laundering risk.
How exactly it works is like people holding stablecoin can purchase a flight ticket, for example, on trip.com using their stablecoin, but trip.com does not necessarily receive. They receive in whatever currency they want to receive, and you handle the middle part of the work.
Absolutely, you're spot on. So the reason Trip.com and all our other clients are working with us is because they are happy to sell to those stablecoin holders, but they don't want to touch any of this. And so what we're doing is that they're selling.
You remove the friction.
Yeah, absolutely. They're selling a plane ticket for, I don't know, $1,000, they get exactly $1,000 on their bank account. And so for them, it's totally transparent and have less fees than what the credit cards are charging. That's also a big plus.
I think people is the most important thing. If you don't have the right people, don't even bother. I've tried many times going to a country whereby I didn't have a strong team or a strong person to lead that country. And going in there, I would say suicidal, but it's very, very tough because in our business, it's a lot about relationship is one, but it's also not a lot about this whole understanding of the industry, knowing where to get vehicles, knowing how to sell the vehicles, knowing how to price it. And it's very prone to fraud, right? As I just said earlier, the used car dealers are not exactly the kindest bunch of people in that sense. So I would say the first thing really, having the team, the right person in place is super important. Number two, you have to assess yourself whether or not the country makes sense and always go in with your eyes wide open. Before I go and enter any new markets, I tend to spend a lot of time in the market myself, right? Just to understand where exactly should I open the store, how does the local market think, where's the opportunity, what is the gaps and stuff like that. So I know I recommend anybody go into any country before you go into it, rather than doing just a lot of us just tend to just do what we call desktop research, right? And even if they do go locally, they do not leave there for a long time. It's touch and go. They go there for a day or two and then they just leave and stuff like that. So I think that's the second thing I would do. I think the third thing that's super important before you expand the business or try to expand the business is to ask yourself, do you have a team, what we call a shared services center, right? SSC of sorts, that could deal with all this, influx of new businesses and stuff, right? So in other words, do you have a CFO team that is really ready to scale with you, right? Do you have a CMO team that's ready to scale with you? Do you have a tech team that's ready to scale with you? Because having to deal with requirements from one country is one thing, but having to deal with requirements from 2, 3, 4, in our case, 8 countries is a whole separate discussion altogether, right? And so, in other words, having that whole framework, process, people that can deal with, requirements, that can deal with invoices from all these countries and stuff like that, super important. So I think the third thing I would say is that having that what we call a shared service center is quite critical when you want to launch internationally. Otherwise, you're going to dig yourself into a very deep hole of cost. If finance in Malaysia and Singapore cannot deal with finance in Japan, or rather cannot deal with the invoices from Japan and stuff like that, then you have a problem because you have to hire locally, and that basically means additional headcount costs.
Right.
What's your investment cycle has been?
Yeah, 22 million US dollar nowadays.
Okay.
In total.
Yeah. How many in total? 2 rounds, right?
We have about 5 rounds.
So and from that front, from knocking on the doors of angel investors, VCs,
Right.
asking for money, what have you learned from the business side of the things?
I found that money is cold. Like our mission, I think sometimes it's very hot, but money is cold. All companies' mission are generating revenue and generating
Value.
the profit value, right?
What do you mean money is cold?
Money looking at money. Money don't looking at mission.
True. Yeah. I mean, another startup founder I spoke to out of Asia, he said that he found the investors in this powder world are not as willing to take risk. So they tend to pile on to companies who are already had early success, and then they want to, jump in, but they don't really take the risk. They're less courageous as compared to the Western counterparts to really bet on a concept in early stage. Do you have the same feeling?
Yes, similar feeling actually.
What have you learned dealing with the VCs?
But dealing with a VC, but you need to understand that we are not totally alike. They are looking for moonshots, and especially when you are maybe an earlier founder, you're maybe not looking for moonshot, and you're more looking at financial independence. Very often, I would hear VCs. You know what the thing VCs don't like is that you raise money, say, at a valuation of $50 million, you raise 10 million, and then within 1 year you have a proposal for someone to buy you at 100 million. It's a bad deal for a VC. Times two in 1 to 2 years, but it can be a very good deal for the founder, and so that's one of the things founders have to pay attention to.
So are VC always looking at 10x? Is that the industry standard?
Yeah, but that's really what they're what they're looking at, and that they want to have those outliers.
So it's really and during summer holidays, we're very fortunate to raise our seed round from Alpha JWC as well as Aaron Tan from Carroll, such that we're pot committed and we just take it forward from there. So and Sequoia came in, reached out to us after our seed round at our second year at Harvard, through our classmate. And the funny thing was that they were asking questions and we're just replying, right? Because we are at professional services, we are used to replying things very quickly. And they asked for a meeting. We flew back for that meeting. We didn't know that's called an investment committee meeting at that point in time. And that they offered a term sheet to us, very fortunately, even before we graduated. But 2 weeks later, they put back the term sheet. It turns out that they didn't know that we were students and we're not even in Singapore at that point in time. But we were very grateful that they waited for us until we graduate. Sequoia Capital waited for us because rather than investing into our peers or competitors, because reality is that at that point in time, there were other players in the market. In fact, they were running full time and they're probably ahead of us, right? But I think after the investments, I asked both Sequoia and Alpha JWC that, hey, why do you decide to invest in us? Drilled into me was that, hey, you guys are very aggressive when it comes to execution, but very conservative when it comes to risk management and compliance. And I think that, and they reckon that that's a good combination for a business of our nature.
But no one's going to give us capital unless we demonstrate that we're worthy of receiving that capital. So we have to show that we're building a great business with a very differentiated business model, where our partners are asking us to do more and more and more and grow into more locations, and where we've never lost track of the fact that we're here to create value, which means you can't just have growth as the only metric that you want to have when you're trying to build a company. It's the balance between growth and profitability. So we're quite proud to say that the reason we think that companies have continued to be willing to give capital to Boltec is because we understand the importance of financial discipline. I am a finance geek at heart, having spent 18 years at Deloitte & Touche, and so we understand this balance of creating value to become a profitable business, as well as the dimension of running fast and building fast and growing at a pace that's maybe faster than much of the rest of the market.
So Boltec is profit generating?
Boltec has become an EBITDA positive value creating business. We're super proud of that. It's very hard to do it. I think of it as an F1 race. We've got to grow faster down the straightaways than the others, but then we have to be able to make the key turns. And one of the turns is to become EBITDA profitable for the first time ever. The second one is to become EBITDA profitable on a sustained basis. We have made the first two turns. We became EBITDA profitable.
Is it this year or last year? When did you achieve those milestones?
This is our first full year as an EBITDA positive business. And again, 5 years into our life, I'm quite proud that we've been able to build a business that spans North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa across 39 countries, and is now a profitable business. So that's something we're extremely proud of.
You were also an avid investor yourself. What kind of companies or young startup entrepreneurs you're looking for?
Well, I'm mostly doing things which is fintech, ideally around payment, because I try to take the habit of really investing into things I understand. I always want to see some revenues, so I usually don't invest on just PowerPoint slides or something like this. We need to see some level of traction, and I think it's very important for founders to go to the market as fast as possible. Some people are just spending too much time on building a product, trying to get something perfect. But the only way to know what's gonna work is to talk to clients.
What would you say the biggest mistake or lesson you learned?
There's plenty of things, and some of them I have shared. So, for instance, look at the cash, always how much cash you have left, because you don't want to have to raise money when you need money, and so it's very important to manage your spending.
How much money do you need to keep? Is it for your company to operating for another year or two? Is that how you look at things?
Yeah, I think that's a good metric. Having 1 year, at least 1 year to 18 months of runway is a good practice. So it means that when you're going to negotiate with potentially new investors, they're not going to be able to twist your arm to accept terms you might not want to accept otherwise.
And the hardest difficult decision was that we had to say goodbyes to many of the colleagues that I really admired and respect, right? And so that was the most difficult time, right? In Genie Books, or rather in my professional career.
Why did you have to part ways with many colleagues at that time?
The reality that we were building for, right, whether the fundings were coming and all that, right, we couldn't get to that goal within that period with that headcount, right? And we had to change course correct very, very quickly, right? And from what I see, at least on LinkedIn and stuff, most of them are happy and in better places. I'm still in contact with many of them, right? And some of them actually came back to join us, so we have been very fortunate.
What was the biggest mistake that you think Mediwell make? Something you wish you could have done differently?
I think human resource things are the most, and I did a lot of mistakes. So every time people are leaving from Mediwell without our willingness, I feel regret all the time. Even if the case is not meet our standard or is too talented, I feel I made the wrong decision. At least every week, I regret my choice, and HR is the most important thing. And I feel that's the most part I did the mistake.
And you said when people leave, when their HR people come and go, and you feel you regretted the mistakes. What mistakes did you make, and what have you learned from those mistakes?
He is not qualified of that standard, but I did a mistake. Or somebody's enoughly qualified, but he's not. Sometimes he or she is greedy, too greedy, not looking at our mission, but just his own plan, and let's make it like, okay, company is just company. And
too much ego, personal
yeah, too much,
ego.
right. Those kind of, so I made a mistake.
Right. But what are the things, for instance, that didn't really go out as planned? Like, say, for instance, I would actually would and should have gone into Malaysia earlier. right? I did not. In fact, we chose to go into Thailand earlier, which we neglected to realize that actually Thailand side of things is not so much a very big automotive passenger vehicle market. It's a much bigger truck market. Truck, right? Like, Horta, right? In that sense, the truck market is much bigger in Thailand, and that sort of taught us a lesson in that sense. While on paper, it looks like 1 million vehicles are transacted per year in Thailand. But the truth of the matter is the addressable market is probably 300 or 400,000 a year, because bulk of the cars, as I said, or the vehicles are trucks, right? Just give you an idea. So I think that's one
And
thing that we
Carol
really
doesn't
didn't.
deal
Yeah.
with deal trucks?
Oh, at that point in time, we do
And
not,
Carol
right?
doesn't deal
Yeah.
trucks?
At that point in time, we do not,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Okay.
that was again something that we learned. One other thing that we learned also was that actually, why were we so against the idea of doing new cars? Right. So most recently, we just launched the brand with Zeekr, in that sense,
Yeah.
and that's our first foray into selling new cars itself. We're going to sign and launch with a few more brands coming in the coming months. But I think what's more important is this also
Yeah.
epiphany or this idea realization suddenly that actually, you know what? It doesn't matter if I'm selling a 4-wheeler, 6-wheeler, 8-wheeler. It doesn't matter if I'm selling a used car or a new car, because at the end of the day, it's the ecosystem that we're providing, right? It's this financial services, it's lending, it's insurance, it's warranties, it's after sales. I think this is the bulk of how we want to actually have the customer within our ecosystem, and more importantly, um, you know, replicate this monetization engine in that sense across all these vehicles. So my point being, it doesn't matter new use, it doesn't matter what type of vehicles and stuff like that. And I think that's something that wasn't part of the plan initially on the get-go. But if you think about it, by and large, to be honest, I would say 80% similar from the plan.
In China, there had some regulatory change, the Shuangjian back in 2021. That must be the darkest time for your business, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. That was in 2021. So our revenue went down to almost zero. Yeah, almost zero. And we did a pivot. So the good thing is the pivot was successful. That's why we are here together, right? So
yeah, it's a
so
rising from the ashes story.
exactly. And our revenue went back, and the numbers of the self-study centers came back. So everything came back. We need to appreciate Derek because he decided to design the system instead of a teacher. So this AI engine got us to do this pivot successfully. But the other traditional education companies or internet-based education companies, they couldn't do the pivot because they didn't have this engine. They didn't have the product because most of them, they used human teachers. It was banned, so they couldn't do the pivot. Only we did a very, very, very dark time.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but like people love this kind of stories. If I may, dig in a little deeper. How long was that down period for you? And what the struggle was, cash flow, and how did you come up? Because the system was already in place before, right? So when that happened, that means all the centers have to go. So everything has to back on online. So how long did that take? And
I think the pivot was about 2 years. That was the hardest time we had. And at the beginning, before the policy, we had the centers. We don't call them self-study centers. They are kind of tutoring centers. But however, at the time, we had the online system already, but it wasn't embedded into the tablet. And we talk about at the beginning, people didn't know what AI was, right? So at that time, even though our company was an AI company and the system was an AI adaptive learning system, but first of all, teachers or tutors, they didn't understand what was AI. So even though there was a system, they still love to teach students. So they work together with the system. I would say 20 to 30% of the tutors in the center, they teach. But 70% or 80%, the students use the system to learn. So it was kind of two teachers. One was human teacher, one was AI teacher. Second reason, parents couldn't really accept just self-study learning with a system without a human teacher. because at the time no one know what AI was, right? So that was really, really hard for our marketing to tell the parents, to tell the teachers, hey, do not teach, you should use the system. That was very hard. So we decided, okay, our marketing strategy, our product strategy should be teachers teach for 20% and students use for 80%. So that wasn't 100% pure self-study center at that time. So, but even though our company, we designed the system, our goal was 100% taught by the system. That was our goal. And it could teach the student 100% by the system only, but because of, the habits. So we still had human teachers. That's why when the policy came, our centers, our franchise centers, they were still considered as traditional tutoring centers because they did have teachers to teach. And the license they had was tutoring center. So based on the policy, all of them had to close down because they closed down. They couldn't purchase any products from us. So our headquarters, the revenue went down to zero. And because they have some prepaid services and learning accounts before the policy, we should give back those money to our franchisees. That's why we had the debt. The debt was huge, and we couldn't pay back all the debt at that time.
It was 900 million RMB or something?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you got all the numbers.
I was like, oh, wow, okay. Derek and Joleen must be not sleeping at that time.
Yeah, that was huge debt. The good thing is, even though we were not 100% if we could be successful again or not, but our franchisees, they were really, really confident about this product, about the team. So actually they supported us, say, hey, let's do this pivot. We believe this system, this engine, this whole product, and the mission is great. And their kids used our system in the past years, and they all got really, really good scores and go to very good schools. And they help other students as well. And they were profitable at that time. So that they believed the product and they believed the business model. And everyone knows that Squirrel AI, this company is an AI education company. It's not a traditional learning company. So it's got to be some way, to do the pivot. So that gave us confidence. And of course, our company is in Shanghai. The Shanghai government and, the central government also gave us a lot of support. So we did a pivot successfully. And luckily, beginning of this year, I think it was around March, we paid back everything. I mean, debt. We paid back all the debt, yeah.
That's amazing. What kind of boss are you?
I'm not a very good boss because I don't like to tell people what to do. I'm expecting them to tell me what I should be doing. Sometimes I have to micromanage and look into the details, but I don't like to do that. So I like to give as much autonomy as possible.
So you want them to have a lot of initiatives, but they also look for your guidance for strategic directions, right? How do you balance?
Yeah, if it's strategic direction, that's easy. What I don't like is, what I hate is like, oh, tell me exactly what you need. I know we want this, but if I had to tell you exactly what I need, I'd rather do it myself. I don't need to have an employee for that, right?
So what kind of employee would thrive in your organization?
But someone who is independent and who can, take a topic and run with it as much as possible.
So they are likely to go run their own business.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a couple of my former employees who end up starting their companies. I'm usually an investor in them, and sometimes I'm happy to provide some advices if I can.
I always encourage people to come and go, right? One of my investors always asks me, hey, so and so has left your company. I say, yeah, so what, right? So and so has left my company, but more importantly, have you asked him or her whether he left the company on a good note? right? And I have many instances whereby my senior managers left the company and they came back, right? After 3 years, after 4 years. And that is very important to me because that means that these guys have been trained elsewhere. They learn other things, other skill sets that I haven't been able to give them. I think that's important. But also, more importantly, they came back because they enjoyed working in Caro in the past and they want to continue to do that, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen this many times in my career, and I think that is the best kind of person that I always find out myself ended up with people who have was in the company. After a few years, they decided that, okay, you know what, they need a change of environment, they want to upgrade, whatever, right? Or want to change of fields
Yeah.
entirely. I always say let them go, it's okay, right? So never take it too personally. I know some CEOs that takes it very personally. They come back and say, I'm not never going to work with that guy ever again. I was like, why? Why take it so personally? I mean, it's okay. You can't expect someone these days to stay for a job for like 10 years or even 20 years. I think that's not
Yeah, it's
good
more
and not healthy for the
motivating.
company. So I would say number two thing is be nice to employees, always leave on a good note if possible. And always look towards hiring, people that you have sort of left the company because those people tend to be the people that actually knows and understand the organization the best.
Recently, you have a comment saying that you want employees that do 007. I think there was quite a lot of room for misinterpretation and misunderstanding. On Reddit, there was like so many comments like, what does that mean, 007? My understanding is like you want people who are committed, not necessarily like 24/7. And it was like a lot of
Yeah,
debate.
exactly. Yeah. So it was exactly that, right? So, for me, I think I was asked out of context. The reporters asked me what kind of culture will you reckon it is in Caro? And I think, I wanted to draw the analogy of aggression, right? Or people who are
Yeah.
aggressive in nature in that sense, or people who are committed to doing work when push comes to shove. And so I gave the example and analogy of 007s, right? Because I think the reporter found it interesting that, the Chinese is moving away from the what we call 996, right? 996 to now
996, yeah.
007, right? Yeah. In the past, it was very famous in that sense. People were talking about, 9 days, 9 a.m., 9 p.m., 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Working in a company that what Alibaba is famous for culturally, right? And so to me, the culture that is more interesting is 007, right? So in some sense, it's like, of course, I don't expect you to come to office 24/7 a day. Is impossible. I don't do that myself, and I don't expect anybody to do that. But I think what's more interesting is that when push comes to shove, when you have projects that needs you to sleep in the office and stuff like that, you jolly well do that, right? Because it's just simply put, being dedicated and being motivated to do your job and having the aggression to close the deal. I think that to me is the most important thing when it comes to being part of the organization in that sense. It's not so much whether or not you put in the hours. To me, the hours is the least of my concern. I have many people in my management team that doesn't even come to office like 2-3 days a week. Yeah.
I think I use the strengths of being a female. Of course, I am strong, but I don't have to be very strong to the guys because they are stronger than me, right? So I think some female leaders, they tend to be really tough and strong in the company to show that, hey, I'm stronger than you. But I think I didn't use that strategy because I tried. I wasn't successful.
So you beat water. You beat them.
You are right. Exactly. I didn't have to. So we cherish each other. And now sometimes we do compromise to each other. But if I am stronger in this topic, then I lead. I'm the person to say yes or no. Even though three of you didn't agree with me, but we have something in common that, okay, I'm leading. So you listen to me. I will make the final decision. And they will say, yes, Joleen, okay, you do it.
How do you keep your calm?
If the funny thing is that if I'm really stressed, the best way is for me to actually work. I try to work on something a bit more creative, but I like to build slides to explain in one slide a particular product.
Impressive. People say. People always ask female leaders, how do you balance work and life? But I have made a point that I will ask male leaders, how do you balance work and life, a family?
I think I've been a very bad dad.
I'm sure they don't agree. How old are your children?
Oh, now they're big. 24, 21, and 18.
Okay. So that's your answer? They think you're a bad dad?
I
That's your
know
answer
I
to that
didn't
question?
I don't dare to ask them, but I remember I was not telling them when I was traveling quite a bit, and I was trying to go after they went to bed or before they woke up. So I didn't spend enough time with them, that's for sure. Yeah,
So the short answer is it's hard to balance.
absolutely.
So do you think you're successful now? What's success in your definition?
Yeah, I think I'm very successful. That's why I'm really satisfied with myself, even though I still have many difficulties and troubles, right? First, I have a great company, a great team, and we still have brighter future. And there's a long way to go. And this industry, this field, this technology is really the future of this whole thing, right? So even though I don't know how long Squirrel AI can go, but as long as I'm on this track, I will be on this track forever. I think the field, the industry I've chosen is really, really bright future. So that's the first thing. Yeah. The second, my kids. I think as a woman, as a mother, of course, the kids are most important to them. So I have a really, really good, boy and girl. They support me. I support them. They are not genius. They are not top, great students, but they understand everything and they really try to, to help the family and to help me. So they try harder. I think they are very experienced and they are very independent. So that's another success of me. And third, I would say I have a very good body shape and looking.
And you worked hard for it.
Exercise.
How many times do you go to gym? You earned it.
Yeah, 5 to 6 times a week.
Kudos.
I go to gym.
Kudos to that. Kudos to that.
To do weightlifting. So I work really hard for my, the whole body and inside health as well. I eat really, really healthy and clean. So, that's the third success. The third success can support everything. I think it's really, really important. And I try to push myself to have good sleep every day, even though I can't have it, but I still try. So I think that's the third success, just health.
I also knew that I wasn't the all-time single best athlete, but I knew that I could outlast anyone. It's a mental model.
It's a determination.
It is. And so it's funny, when I'm a horrible swimmer. When I did the Ironman World Championship for the first time, I knew that it would be a frighteningly horrible experience for me to get in the water with 900 other men in a mass start in Kona, Hawaii, who were going to swim right over top of me. And the main thing I had to do was program my brain to recognize I wouldn't drown, just learn how to not die. And if I learned how to not die, I would survive. And I said to everyone, I guarantee you, as long as I didn't drown, I will be at that finish line. And I was. So I'm someone who really likes the ongoing challenge. At this moment, I'm training for a really crazy race. My wonderful wife and I. It's always good, by the way, to have a great training partner. So my wife is training with me for something called the World Marathon Challenge. We'll run 7 marathons on each of the 7
around the world
in 7 consecutive days. So
what?
Yeah. So that will be at the end of January. So I love the idea of running a business at a very high caliber, working really hard, but figuring out a way to make time so that you can fit in a extreme challenge. It just shows you a little bit of how my brain is wired. But I'll also say that you can only do many of these things with a little help from your friends. In this case, I'd never be able to do this training without a little help from my wife, my life partner, who helps to get through these things. And so I spend time with her maybe while training.
Oh, that's lovely. I made a point to ask all the male founders, how do they balance work and life? Sounds like you guys have figured it out. But it's lucky that your wife is into that as well, because my husband has trying to ask me to row with him for years.
Yeah. It is its own challenge. You have to find a happy place where you can where you can find your own unique individual happiness. It doesn't have to be that you do something like what we're doing, what my wife and I do, but you do have to find time for the balance between mind and body or between work and play. It's just a fact of life. I love my life, and I love my time with my wife. I'm not someone who says, gosh, I got to get away from my family, I got to get away from my wife. I want that time. And at the same point in time, no one twists my arm to get me to go to work every day because I love what I do. I love who I do it with, and we've built a team and a atmosphere at Boltec that I think is really very, very much a family kind of app.
So are you doing the tech 996 or 24/7?
It will seem like that is the case. My biggest challenge, or maybe my biggest change in my life, has come that I have to focus on finding a way to sleep. I actually consult with a longevity coach on sleep because my brain is
Too wired up. You're too active.
It's trying to solve problems while I'm
all the time
asleep, and I have to stop it. I love to run with just those thoughts in my head, and I can solve problems on a long run by just thinking alone. But I want to have sleep where I'm not thinking about the work.
Yeah. Something that you would tell yourself, a 20-year-old Aaron. Any advice you would give?
Well, buy Tesla shares.
Buy
Right.
Tesla shares.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, so no, I think I would definitely double down on investing into a lot of these things, like all the Meta shares, your Google shares, and all the stuff like
Or
that.
the Magnificent
Yeah.
Seven.
Right, yeah, and then maybe sell to Score. No, joking. Anyway, so yeah, so what would I tell 20-year-old self? That's basically what I would do, and it's more from a money management standpoint because I'm actually I actually enjoy investing a lot, like be it secondary or primary markets in that sense. And one thing I've gotten to the realization of learning recently is that sometimes it's a bit of you opportunity cost in that sense, right? Say, for instance, you have $1 million locked up in a particular share, and then the share is trading sideways for a long time, and in fact, trading downwards and stuff like that. And for a lot of us, it's like, I'm just going to hold it till it goes back up, and then I'll sell once it goes back up. But actually, you're losing out on all these rising opportunities, right? Say, for instance, Tesla, right? It goes up like 80% a year. You could have, sold the money, yes, absorb maybe 20% of the losses, put it into Tesla, and, write up another 60%. It's opportunity cost at the end of the day. I think high level, that's what I would say, right? So beware of opportunity cost.
What was the one advice over your career that you are glad you didn't listen?
Something like you should try to go the same pathway that someone else has already gone. Just follow someone's pathway because that person was already a success, and you should follow, and then you will be successful. So I think I didn't listen this kind of thing.
It's so Chinese, right? We're so used to like follow. You do this, you go to this university, but then what? What would you say to yourself?
Buy Bitcoin.
Last week, I spoke to Aaron Tan from Carol. I asked him the same question, and he said, buy Tesla shares. Great minds. Great minds.
Jokes aside, I think I would tell myself to put in a lot more effort on building stronger relationships across not just myself. I spend time and invest in that. Also coach the team on how to do that much earlier in their career and working in the company.
So you mean bring the team as more co-founders?
Partly, but also that in between them, right, they have to build the same respect and trust that we have for the founders and I have for the team as well, right?
Have a real dose of humility and positivity. And what I mean by that is it won't all happen for you magically in your first try. You will hear no. You will get answers you didn't want to get. And if you're going to let that deter you, I think it's a mistake. So don't let that happen. The second comment that I would make about the same is really have a energy for helping others. Not just humility to accept that no, and that you'll have problems that detour you, but this idea that it's never about just yourself. You'll never succeed by yourself. We're an enabling capability. Boltech by itself isn't the solution. Boltech with our business partners, Boltech with the insurance industry, Boltech with incumbent carriers can be really successful. But Boltech by itself, now we're like an ingredient in a great batch of cookies. But that ingredient by itself doesn't taste the same as the baked cookies where you put all the ingredients together and then you followed the instructions and you baked them the right way. So that's the advice that I would give to anyone.
What we heard again and again wasn't certainty, but commitment. To keep learning, to keep deciding, to keep building even when the path isn't clear. That's what we come here to understand, the long game behind Asia's tech stories. From all of us at Asia Tech Lens, Happy New Year!